Hi everyone, welcome to this masterclass on love in Twelfth Night. So today we are going to work together towards answering this question: how does Shakespeare present love in the play? And this is the kind of open essay question that Cambridge might ask you to do in the exam. I think if I was to answer this question, there would be two main threads to my answer. The first one would be this idea that love is an illogical force, doesn't really follow reason, it doesn't necessarily follow sense, it's illogical. And because of that, it turns everyone, even those characters who are supposed to be educated, upper class, reasonable people, into fools. In fact, the only person in the play, perhaps, who is not turned into a fool by love is Fesse, the licensed fool of the play. All of the other characters, perhaps in some ways, are influenced by love. All the other main characters, at least. So that's my first thread that I want us to discuss today. The second is this idea that perhaps, despite all of that, love is actually a little bit less important than finding an appropriate match. If we look at the ending of the play, ending up with somebody who is appropriate for you seems more important than ending up with somebody who you really love or who loves you in return. So starting with this first idea of love as an illogical force which turns everybody into fools, I wanted to start with Sir Andrew. Now, Sir Andrew is obviously a natural fool. He is ridiculed throughout the play by Sir Toby and perhaps by the audience. But one of the ways that he's ridiculed is through his perhaps love, at least desire for Olivia. This is from the section where Fabian and Sir Toby trick Sir Andrew into challenging Cesario / Viola / Sebastian. Sir Toby says, "Did she see thee the while, old boy? Tell me that." Sir Andrew's response is, "As plain as I see you now. This was a great argument of love in her toward you. Slight, will you make an ass of me?" Now, I really like this little moment with Sir Andrew because it's so nearly self-reflective. He very nearly here understands that they are making an idiot of him, but he doesn't quite. And when he's offered this opportunity to believe that maybe Olivia is ignoring him to make him jealous and showing favour towards Cesario to make him jealous, he immediately believes it. And it's a good example of where, because of love, people do things that are illogical. He seems aware here that they are joking, that they are trying to make a fool of him. But he very quickly goes along with it. He challenges Cesario to a duel, and it obviously does not turn out very well for him. Second example of this is obviously Malvolio. Malvolio begins the play, normally all dressed in black. He's a Puritan. He behaves very morally and very properly. And by the centre of the play, has been turned into this figure in yellow stockings, cross-gartered, smiling all of the time, breaking into song at one point. It's a very clear example of when love can totally transform somebody. And here we enjoy ridiculing him for this as well. This is a good example from the scene with Olivia, which is hilarious to see on stage. Olivia worrying that Malvolio is going mad, not seeing the love in him, seeing it as madness, which tells us a lot about love, asks him, "Wilt thou go to bed?" Meaning, you need some rest. You know, there's something wrong with you. His response is to read that, obviously very differently, "To bed, aye, sweetheart, and I'll come to thee." Her response tells us a lot about what this would be like on stage. "God comfort thee!" exclamation point. She is horrified by this reaction from Malvolio. It's not just that he's behaving slightly madly, he's behaving very inappropriately. She thinks that God needs to be involved here. She kind of believes that he's possessed, that he's been driven mad by love, perhaps by lust in this example. Now, what's really interesting about how illogical love is that it has the same effect as it does on Sir Andrew and Malvolio, characters who are to some extent quite foolish, who we are allowed to laugh at throughout the play, as it does on upper class characters. Orsino is nearly as ridiculous as Sir Andrew in the way that he courts Olivia. And that's really unusual because he's the Count of Orsino. He's the top dog in this society. He should be somebody who's worthy of respect and very dignified. And yes, the way that he loves Olivia is a lot more poetic and kind of refined, but Shakespeare's still laughing at him, and I think we, the audience, still laugh at just how hyperbolic his expression of love is, and kind of how pathetic. Like, he never goes to Olivia himself until Act 5 of the play. He never actually acts on it. He just sort of mopes around, and I think we do laugh at him for that throughout the play too. This is from Orsino's speech in Act 1. Oh, when mine eyes did see Olivia first, methought she purged the air of pestilence. That instant was I turned into a hart, and my desires like fell and cruel hounds ere since pursue me. There's a lot of hyperbole here. Olivia is so beautiful, he thinks she purges the air of pestilence. Appropriate for 2020. He thinks she's so beautiful, she removes plague, she kills all diseases, she's like this healing force. That's a really beautiful image and quite positive about Olivia. But the next bit, that instant was I turned into a hart. A hart is a deer, although he's punning on heart as well. And my desires like fell and cruel hounds ere since pursue me. So at the moment that he fell in love, he describes himself as being turned into a deer that is hunted by his desires ever since. So it's like he's constantly being hunted by this need, this desire for Olivia. Like he's the victim in this situation. He's really suffering for love. Both of those images are really over the top, and Shakespeare is definitely drawing attention to the fact that Orsino is so obsessed with this that he's quite self-pitying. He's being pursued by his desires. He says he won't go and hunt with Curio. He's not acting. He's just moping around. Even the positive image in the first two lines, she purges the air of pestilence, is really over the top. It's not a realistic view of love. And maybe that's why Orsino doesn't get what he wants. His love is not very realistic. It's not very pragmatic. Even though he's chosen somebody at the right social level to him, he doesn't seem to be approaching love in a very helpful way at the start of the play. Another example of this, kind of the mirror image of Orsino's love, is Olivia's. So Olivia, similarly to Orsino, is at the top of the society. Her response to Cesario, she knows herself is very illogical, and she certainly stops behaving in the dignified, respectable way that she was at the beginning of the play when she had sworn that for 7 years she wouldn't see another man. She so quickly goes back on that promise. This section of a speech between Olivia and Viola, I think, is really useful for showing just how ridiculous Olivia is made by love too. I did send after the last enchantment you did here, a ring in chase of you. So did I abuse you, myself, my servant, and I fear me you. A little bit later on in that scene, Viola says, I pity you, and Olivia's response is, that's a degree to love. So the first bit of this quotation, the last enchantment you did here, is always interesting for talking about love in the play, because enchantment suggests that Cesario has somehow cast a spell when Olivia has fallen for him. It's not just after the last speech that you gave or after your last visit, the last enchantment. You must have done something to me to change the way that I feel. This is magic, right? This isn't logical. It doesn't make any sense. This final part of the line, so did I abuse myself, my servant, and I fear me you, is interesting in a couple of ways. Olivia is aware that in sending a ring with Malvolio after Cesario, she's broken the social code. She, as an upper class woman, should not be chasing the servant of the Count. She shouldn't be doing the wooing at all. So she knows that she's behaved in a way that kind of goes against the social rules. In the structure of the sentence, we can see that as well, because we have myself, comma, my servant, and, comma, I fear me, comma, you. It's very fragmented. We can see that she's uncomfortable with this situation, but it's almost like she doesn't have control over herself anymore now that she's in love. And I think that's shown excellently in this last section. When Viola says, I pity you, Olivia is so desperate for Cesario to love her back. She says that pity is a degree to love. Pity is almost like love. Maybe it's like a step on the way to love, which is one of the most pathetic things you could possibly say. She likes Cesario so much that she's happy that he feels sorry for her, because at least that's a positive emotion towards her. Again, Shakespeare is really ridiculing what love can do to the most respectable, sensible people. Okay, so that is the first thread, I think, of how love is presented in the play. But I do think it's also important to think about the ending. And the endings of comedies always fix the social order. They restore things to the way that they're supposed to be. Sometimes that's great and we end up with really lovely, happy marriages. Sometimes there might be some things that we're kind of unhappy with in that, because the social order means that Malvolio is alone, that Antonio is alone, that there's no longer any interesting chemistry between Orsino and Cesario Viola, because he's allowed to fancy her now that he realizes that she's a woman. And Shakespeare does seem to be telling us that love maybe is less important than finding the right person. In the final scene, part of the comic resolution is when Orsino says to Olivia about Sebastian, "Be not amazed, right noble is his blood." So Olivia has married a guy who is not who she thought he was. It's quite a shock for her in this last scene to find out that she thought she was marrying Cesario, and actually Cesario is Viola and she has accidentally married her twin brother. That's quite a shock. Orsino says, don't worry about it. Be not amazed. It's fine because he's got noble blood. As if that could be the only reason that she could be uncomfortable in this situation. This match is sanctioned because it's an appropriate match. Even though she didn't marry the person she thought she was marrying, she did marry somebody at the same social level as her, who is right for her. The fact that that happens to both of them at the end of the play perhaps suggests overall love's fine. Love's maybe ideal in the case of Orsino and Viola, but marrying the person who you're supposed to marry because of your social position perhaps is more important to a comic resolution. Okay, so we've explored quite a few ways here that Shakespeare shows that love turns people into idiots, and started to think about the ending, and maybe that shows that love is perhaps less important than marrying the right person. What I'd now like you to do is to go away and answer this question. So you might like to use some of the quotations in this PowerPoint. This is also linked underneath the video, so you can come back to these quotations. Or choose quotations of your own from elsewhere in the play. Watching this might have made you think of other parts of the play that you think would be appropriate for answering this question. And then follow these steps. You'll have seen this guide to answering open essay questions before. Think really closely about the question, first of all. How does Shakespeare present love in the play? Underline the key words in the question. Obviously, we've got love as a really important key word. Don't forget about Shakespeare. Often students write full essays without mentioning the author. Make sure that you are mentioning how does Shakespeare present, what is Shakespeare's opinion, what is Shakespeare trying to do to us, the audience. And you need to read through the text, selecting the most appropriate evidence. As I've said, lots of evidence is on this PowerPoint for you. You can use that to help you. You can even use this PowerPoint almost as a brief plan for writing this essay. And then all the boxes in green on this guide are to give you some ideas about how to structure your essay. So the first thing you need to do is to introduce your argument. Now, your argument should always answer the question in brief. Use the keywords of the question, but make your opinion clear. So, how does Shakespeare present love in the play? We might say something like, Shakespeare presents love in the play as a force which turns all of the characters into fools. Straight away there we've used Shakespeare and love, but we've actually said something about it. We've not just said Shakespeare talks about love lots in Twelfth Night. And that doesn't really answer the question because it's a how question. Then you need to move into the main body of your essay. So you need to prove ideas with evidence. Each of your body paragraphs in your essay should make one point, back it up with evidence, and then analyse. Lower down the school, you'll have seen the PEE structure. You can follow that, making a point, using some evidence, explaining. But at this stage of year 11, you might move beyond that structure. So you might have 2 quotations in a paragraph. You might start with a quotation and then explain how you think it answers the question. You don't need to stick quite so strictly to the PE structure, but if you're struggling, that's a useful structure to help you out. And then to end an open essay, you need a quick and strong conclusion that is not a repeat of your introduction or just an empty sentence or 2. So what you need to try to do is to add to your overall argument in a stronger way, offering a clearer opinion or evaluation. So you might say, overall, it is clear that Shakespeare is trying to tell us that love is less important than marrying the right person socially. However, we enjoy the inappropriate love so much that he doesn't achieve this. So that your opinion is very strong and clear, and you're adding something compared to your introduction. Okay, so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these essays on love in 12th night in the near future. Good luck in your mock exams. This will have been excellent preparation, so well done.